Nicole Roberts struggled to carry heavy bags as she walked along the train platform. School break was over, and it was time for the third-year medical student to catch the train back to her university. The weather was cold and windy, making Nicole shiver. Despite the weather, there were many people at the railway station. Some of them were getting ready to get on trains. Others were saying bye to their friends and relatives. Since Nicole's mom was sick, there was no one to see her off that day. Moving through a crowd of people to find the right platform, the young woman caught herself thinking that she might want to get inside the warm train as fast as possible. At that moment, her attention was drawn to a young man standing next to a food stand. The stranger was not dressed weather appropriately. He trembled in the piercing cold wind, shifting his weight from leg to leg. The young man was clearly homeless. All the passers-by ignored him and showed him no sympathy. The young man was approaching different people, asking them for money for a ticket to New York. Judging by the pace at which the young man was receiving the money, he would likely have to stand there for another week. At the same time, the young man acted modestly. He promised to pay back everyone who gave him money, even if it was only a few cents. Of course, no one believed his words. They stereotyped him and thought that he was collecting money to buy cigarettes or alcohol, which he would never pay back. But Nicole felt that the young man was truly in trouble. Right away, she understood that he was not a con man. There was nothing conniving or sneaky in his eyes. Since Nicole had not yet purchased her own ticket, she decided to give her money to the young man instead. "It's okay, I can go tomorrow. It seems like he really needs to get to New York as soon as possible," rationalized Nicole. Nicole approached the young man and handed him several rolled-up bills. She said, "Here, take this, and I'll manage. I also need to get to New York, but I can go tomorrow." The young man teared up. He had been standing for an hour and collected only a couple of dollars. And now a savior appeared in the form of this young woman. She stopped his torment in one fell swoop. "Thank you. My name's David Brooks. I will definitely return your money. Don't worry, miss," said the young man anxiously. Nicole smiled reassuringly. She told David her name before heading towards the exit. The guy followed her with his eyes before heading to the ticket office to buy his ticket. The young man had not always been so destitute. Just 6 months prior, his life was totally different. But now, thanks to Nicole, he had the chance to rectify his situation and regain his good name. After paying the fare to New York, David boarded the train and presented his ticket to the conductor. The conductor gave David a contemptuous look and grimaced. "Just look at this homeless traveler. His looks alone will scare away half the passengers. Why do I have to deal with this?" grumbled the conductor, who held prejudices bordering on outright hatred towards poor people. At first, David wanted to clarify that he had not always been homeless. However, after feeling all the negative energy emanating from the conductor, he lowered his head and quietly went to find his seat. To his great relief, he had a window seat, which made him very happy. Soon, the train began to move and head along the planned route. David began to realize that he was breaking out of the hopeless abyss in which he had been for several months. Picking up the speed, the train was taking him to New York, which to David symbolized his new life. Meanwhile, Nicole returned home and lied to her mom, saying that the train got canceled. She did not want to tell her mom that she had given away all her money to a homeless man at the train station. Nicole knew that her mom would not approve of her choice, and therefore did not want to aggravate the situation. In any case, she would get on the road the next day. Mrs. Roberts did not ask her daughter unnecessary questions, knowing that she had already spent the money. Sighing sadly, the woman took out her purse and gave her daughter several $100 bills. Amanda Roberts carefully placed the bills into the pocket of Nicole's jacket. The next day, Nicole once again came to the train station. Only this time, she did not see the young homeless man with such sad and desperate eyes. Nicole embarked on a long journey to New York, where she would continue her studies to become a surgeon. Fast forward 10 years, and Nicole's life had changed beyond recognition. Not only did she graduate medical school, but she completed her internship in surgery in the best clinic in the city. The management of the surgical department understood that Nicole Roberts was determined to succeed and build a career in their institution. The department head knew that it was risky to hire someone who had just recently completed their internship, but still he decided to give Nicole a shot. He never regretted his choice. A few months later, he was convinced that nobody was more deserving of that spot in the best clinic in the city than Nicole. Unfortunately, success at work did not mean that Nicole had a happy personal life. At the time, the young surgeon had already been married and divorced. Her ex-husband Spencer liked living at someone else's expense and loathed hard work. At the university, the handsome man was the captain of the basketball team and was used to getting a lot of attention from women. Nicole, who at the time was a modest provincial beauty, fell under his spell. Many of Nicole's friends told her that Spencer was not a good match for her. Despite her friends' advice, Nicole believed the charming man. She made a mistake by marrying him. They lived together for only 3 years, after which they realized that they were not suitable for each other. The divorce was so painful that Nicole made a vow never to trust men again. Fortunately, they did not have children and no joint assets to split. Since then, Nicole was single and ignored her male colleagues who liked flirting with her. She was a talented surgeon who was appreciated not only by her patients, but also by the clinic's managers, who allocated her first large office for receiving patients. One day, there was a persistent knock on Nicole's door. "Come in," said Nicole, without taking her eyes off the medical journal. When the door opened, a man entered the office. He looked like he was in his 30s and was wearing a fashionable business suit. "Hello, Nicole," he said, and sat down on the couch next to Nicole's desk. At that moment, Nicole stopped reading the journal and looked at the strange visitor in surprise. His face seemed vaguely familiar. When she studied it more closely, she gasped in amazement. Across from Nicole was sitting the very same homeless man to whom Nicole gave money for a ticket to New York. "David, is that really you? How many years has it been? It feels like we saw each other only a few days ago," the woman exclaimed. 10. We haven't seen each other for 10 years, David answered quietly. "You have changed so much. You became so... how should I put it?" Nicole thought out loud. "I became rich," David said, smiling slightly. He clasped his hands together and began telling his story. David Brooks grew up in a poor family. His dad was disabled and his mom worked as a cleaner in a roadside motel. David was interested in everything to do with computers from a young age. After becoming a first-class self-taught programmer, David got a job in a trading company, the director of which turned out to be a man with a dark past. He told naive David to get a job at a rival company. "There is nothing wrong with it. It's like working undercover. You'll use the competitor's server to provide me with the necessary information. I'll make it worth your while. You can take my word for it," the company's director said confidently, placing his hand on David's shoulder. The young programmer hesitated ever so slightly. A few days later, he took the job at the competing company. Working on two fronts, David did not know just how much he was risking. His illegal activities as the undercover agent did not last long. Soon, David was discovered by the company's security service. At that point, the young programmer began to realize just how much trouble he had gotten himself into. Security officials estimated the damage caused by David to be several $100,000s. Of course, he did not have such a huge sum of money. Therefore, he had to sell everything he owned. Unfortunately, this was enough to pay off only a quarter of the money he owed. The amount was intentionally set so high so as to ruin David's career, punish, and humiliate him. What's most hurtful is the man who dragged poor David into the entire mess immediately abandoned and fired him. That's when David decided to run away from the city. Most of all, David did not want to put his family in danger. David knew that the security officials needed him only. They had nothing on his parents. Unfortunately, he did not have money to pay for a ticket. That's why he had to ask for help from passers-by. Thanks to Nicole's help, David was able to make it to New York, which presented him with great opportunities. Already on his second day in the city, the young man was able to get a job that helped him settle into his new home. Working 16 hours a day, David achieved the type of success that others can only dream of. The young man was not afraid of learning new things. He approached each task with his signature enthusiasm and drive. Having delved into the intricacies of the cryptocurrency market, David made a lot of money in a relatively short time, which allowed him to feel like a wealthy businessman. All that time, the young businessman did not forget about the favor that Nicole did him. All he could think of was how to repay his debt. By accident, David learned that his savior lived and worked in New York. An article was published in a local newspaper, which celebrated the work and talent of a young surgeon who was admired by everyone who knew her. The article was accompanied by a picture in which David easily recognized Nicole. It was then that the young businessman decided to find his savior in order to repay his debt. After hearing David's moving story, Nicole couldn't hold back her tears. "My God, you had to go through so many trials," whispered Nicole. In response to this, David smiled and asked if she was busy that evening. Seeing the confusion in Nicole's eyes, he decided to be more straightforward and invited her to dinner at a restaurant. At first, Nicole wanted to decline his invitation, but then thought, why not, and decided to go out with David. What do I have to lose? Why not unwind and let someone else take care of me for once? Thought Nicole as she showed David the exit. She caught herself smiling at the thought. It gave her hope that her personal life would drastically change in the near future. Of course, when getting ready for dinner, Nicole couldn't know that 6 months later, she would become David's wife. That, however, came later. First, she simply enjoyed the company of a pleasant man, whose acquaintance she made in such an unusual way 10 years prior.